Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out from the library and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. It is Thursday, February 18th. I'm doing my second podcast of the day. I did the first podcast on the way to the library, and I returned a bunch of Alien vs. Predator comics because for some reason I'm on a big Alien kick right now. I'm reading everything I watched all the movies that have the word Alien in the title, and now I've read a bunch of the comics. I don't think I'm going to read any more. The Judge Dredd vs. Predator vs. Alien was pretty dumb. I think that's probably enough for me, but amusing enough. And I have one more Alien movie to watch. That's Alien vs. Predator Requiem. It's just the last one. I figure I might as well run out the series, right? But that's neither here nor there. What I wanted to talk to you today about was introducing complicated games or introducing games to new players. Now, I don't want to talk generally about gateway games or about getting people into the hobby. Very specifically, I'm talking about how you teach new games and what approaches you take. I'm doing this without notes. Usually I make at least a couple notes. I have some bullet points to refer to as I walk, but instead I'm just going to use the amount of time that I have to walk and see what I have to say. Because I was thinking about two particular incidents in a gameplay yesterday. So I had a little time yesterday. I played Brass Birmingham and the Grand Carnival with a pal. A couple things came up that I thought were pretty interesting. The first was partway through. So this pal had watched the video about how to play Brass Birmingham, and he had played Brass Lancashire once a very long time ago. But for all intents, he was a new player. And if you haven't played Brass, it is a particularly tricky game because it has finicky rules about how you get things. For example, if you're going to build something that needs coal, you can only do so if the place that you're building it is connected either to one of the board edge coal markets or to a place on the board that has coal that they can use. If you're going to build something that uses iron, however, you don't need to be connected to the market because iron is moved by horseback and it does not need to move through one of the rail or canal links. Further, beer, which is the lubricant that makes sails happen in the game, if you're going to make a sail, you have to use a barrel or sometimes 2 barrels of beer to do so. And when you do so, you have to have the beer available to you. The beer can be available to you in one of 3 ways. 1, it is at the market where you're selling the goods. 2, it is at a brewery either that you own or someone else's own that's connected by a network to the market where you're selling the beer or you're selling the product. Or 3, if you own the beer, it can come from any brewery on any of your breweries anywhere on the board, whether or not it's on the network, because you could move it by horse. So as you can see, there are 3 different sets of conversations about how you use resources. And then there's all sorts of other rules as well. So Brass is a pretty complicated game. You also, on your turn, you get to take 2 actions. And one of the things that's most fun about Brass, but also hardest to get your head around, is that your opponents can use your stuff. If you build a brewery, or you build a coal mine, or you build an ironworks, your opponents can use those things to do their stuff. In Brass Lancashire, that problem comes from people using your iron to build railways and then sell goods at the market or whatever, or sometimes using your port to sell goods. Alternately, in Brass Birmingham, it's almost always about somebody using the beer you are intending to use. So I was playing with this friend, and early in the game, he started to make a move that would be setting me up to do something really great. And it was the sort of move where if you'd played Brass a couple times, you would totally know not to make that move but he was new, and so he didn't have all the implications there. And I said, just as a heads up, if you do that, you are opening me up to possibly do this. I'm not saying I'm going to, but it would be a possibility. He's like, oh, well, I'm going to reconsider that. And so he changed his move. Now, I did this entirely with the goal of having him have a better game experience. Now, later in the game, he made a similar mistake that honestly, I didn't notice he was making it in the context of my game because I was already sort of planning to do a thing similar to what he did. So the mistake he made did not affect me in the same way. But the result of his mistake gave me an opening to do something that used up like all the beer on the board and made him very frustrated because he was planning to do the same thing. And I apologize a bit. I mean, I didn't take back the move and he didn't expect me to. Part of what's fun about Brass Birmingham is someone stealing your beer and you going, that was my move, ah! It's great. But it did, to me, get to this interesting spot where, I warn him about a move that he would do that maybe gave me a benefit. And then later I didn't warn him when he repeated that or made a similar move. Similarly, in our next game of Grand Carnival, I was really focused on getting the sets by accumulating different kinds of exhibits. What I forgot was that if one of your people going through your carnival doesn't visit each exhibit that you make that doesn't get visited by a guest and get a ticket on it, doesn't count in final scoring. So I used 2 or 3 turns acquiring exhibits that would never score because I was never able to get a person over to them. And I realized it too late for the game to conclude. And, he expressed similar empathy regarding my mistake that I had with his when I used his beer, or I used the beer he was planning to use. But I think we both understood this idea that there's a point at which you've explained the rules enough that you have to expect a new player to take some of the rules on. But at the same time, you try to walk that line that makes the game fun to play, even if it means maybe it's a little less fun to play as the person teaching the game. Now, I have a couple things I do to try to maximize the fun for other players. The first thing is I almost always will let someone take something back if they discover that shortly after they make their move, if they discover that was a bad move or realize it was. I always let them take their move back. Now, the place that most often happens with me is with my wife. So my wife and I are playing a game together. She makes a move, and then I realize it right away, or we realize it together that it was not the best move. So I'll encourage her to take that back. By contrast, I try as little as possible to take moves back myself, because I think I'm challenging myself to be a little more thoughtful up front and to live with my mistakes. Mistakes are fine. It's part of the fun of a game. But I'm curious, for other players, what are some of the ways that you shape how you play and how you introduce a new game, especially one you've got a lot of experience with, to help maximize the fun for other players?
Greetings to all my groovy geeks and glorious gamers. The long wait is almost over because March Mayhem 2021 is nearly upon us. Yes, February 15th will no longer be remembered as the day that Socrates was sentenced to death for impiety. It will be remembered as the kickoff date for Game Fights 2021 March Mayhem Tournament, brought to you by Rattlebox Games. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 6 long weeks, we will bring you the hot heat that can only be generated by putting 32 of the greatest board games of all time up against one another in a board game Battle Royale! Circle March 27th on your calendar in red Sharpie so you don't forget to join us for our live Finale Spectacular! Where we will discover which game will come out on top. Set your podcatchers to stun as we bring you all of the action, and head over to @GameFightShow on Twitter to vote for your favorite games. This is Rob Huber for Brendan Riley, Game Fight Show, Rattlebox Games, saying, I'll see you on the 15th.
I'm curious, for other players, what are some of the ways that you shape how you play and how you introduce a new game, especially one you've got a lot of experience with, to help maximize the fun for other players? Or don't you care about that? And that's perfectly legit too, to say, I don't really care about making sure other players are having fun. That's not, I like to show them the game, and then they can figure out how to have fun or not on their own. So if you look at a game like Brass, that's super complicated, one of the things I try to do is keep an eye out for rookie mistakes, like the one I was talking about, and just warn people of the consequences of the thing they're doing. I think it's more fun to win a game if everybody is playing on the same level of information. They might not have the same level of strategy, but often if you're new to a complex game, you just literally won't see the changes that make for a complicated interaction. I think making sure there's player aids available to everybody is really important. So I try to do that. I try really hard to put scoring and winning up front in my discussions, because people are most attentive at the beginning, And nothing gets my goat more than when I've done a careful explanation and then we get to the end and somebody's like, well, I didn't know that worked that way. Which is kind of what I did in Grand Carnival. I was telling you, I got to the end, and even though he had told me that only buildings that have tickets on them will score, it didn't really resonate to me the way it needed to in order for me to make sure I was going to score all my buildings. So that part became a little trickier for me because it didn't feel great to do all that work to get those buildings and then have them not score. At the same time, it was entirely my own fault that happened. That's the position I was in. Another thing I do to help get people into a game is to introduce things in terms of theme. The more that I can build in a narrative that shapes the way that the rules work, the easier it is, I think, for people to understand and absorb them. I mean, that's part of why Brass is such a difficult game to teach, because building in the narrative of how things move around the board feels a little arbitrary. Well, coal always moves through the links, iron moves by horse cart, beer can go either one, but you can only move your own beer by horse cart. Well, this is weird. That's really weird. That said, I find that those kinds of thematic explanations really help to understand what's going on in the game. And the last thing that I do when I'm introducing a new player to a game is I try to follow the advice offered by Quentin Smith in Shut Up and Sit Down, who suggests that when people ask a question, that shows they're engaged, and it is a good approach to answer their question rather than fobbing them off. Because often when people ask a question, they are asking something you're going to cover later. But people are building neural pathways in their mind that help them understand the game. And if they ask the question at a particular point, it's because they're starting to build a pathway toward that idea. So if you then shut down that idea at the point where they're asking it, I think it's counterproductive in terms of their ability to understand the game. What they really want to do is understand a particular connection or idea at the time they're asking it, because that's when they're really wondering about it. So I think for myself and for when I teach, I try really hard to focus on explaining a game, answering questions when the players ask those questions, as a way of sort of really focusing on giving them the learning that they need. I don't know, this felt a little rambly today, but hopefully it was entertaining enough. I'd be keen to hear what you do, particularly in terms of helping people think through complex rules interactions and your role in winning or losing while people are learning those interactions. You can let me know those things over on Board Game Geek and Guild 3269, which is the Pick Up and Deliver Guild. You can email me, Brendan at Rattlebox Games, or tweet at me at Rattlebox Games. Right now we have our Game Fight show going on, so please do head over there and subscribe to the show. And more importantly, vote on whatever today's poll is, so that you can help determine who wins. We put up new polls every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And so, yeah. So I guess there isn't, although the polls run for 18 hours, no, 27 hours. They usually go from noon until 3 p.m. the next day. So when this comes out, you should have a couple more hours to go and vote on the Friday poll. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.